Breaking tonight, just 48 hours until the third and final presidential debate, and both campaigns are dealing with major new controversies. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Developing on the campaign trail tonight, there are new complaints about a rigged election, new accusations against Donald Trump. His wife steps forward to defend his behavior, and there are new bombshells from WikiLeaks. Let's begin tonight with the Clinton campaign and stunning reports that say one of her top State Department lieutenants tried to make a deal with the FBI in the middle of its investigation into her email scandal. Now, that lieutenant is Patrick Kennedy, and if his name sounds familiar, it should. This guy was neck deep in the Benghazi controversy, and his fingerprints were all over her email scandal from the very start. The details on Kennedy's attempt to reach a deal comes directly from the FBI's own files. Now, keep in mind, this guy was working for you. He was supposed to be working for you at the State Department in dealing with the FBI that was investigating Clinton in the email. The FBI's own files, and this was the lead issue that was discussed in an exclusive interview that Fox's Carl Cameron just landed with Donald Trump, where he asked him about an FBI note that certainly makes it sound like Patrick Kennedy cared more about protecting Hillary Clinton than protecting you. Watch.
What's illegal? I mean, what's taking place is illegal between Justice Department and the FBI and Secretary of State and the State Department. I think it's crazy what's going on. It's totally illegal. It's a criminal act. It's a crime. And I hear the Republicans are going to hold hearings after the election. Why would you hold them after the election? You want to hold those hearings before the election. But this is a criminal act, and it's incredible that they can do this and get away with it.
In moments, Judge Andrew Napolitano will tell us if Donald Trump is right, whether a crime has been committed here. But we begin tonight with our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who's going to set this up for you so we all understand it. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Megyn. These FBI records released today state in black and white that one of Secretary Clinton's most trusted lieutenants, Patrick Kennedy, wanted a backroom deal with the FBI over the classification of Clinton's emails. A leading Republican says tonight it's evidence of a broad conspiracy.
I think it's corruption. I think it's manipulation. I think it's against the law, and it certainly goes to the intent. Somebody should have been prosecuted for this.
According to the FBI interviews known as 302s, Kennedy wanted to do a swap. The FBI would downgrade a highly sensitive Clinton email to unclassified, and in return, the Bureau would get coveted slots for agents overseas. An FBI agent's name was cut from the records posted online today that read in part, quote, "Redacted believes state has an agenda, which involves minimizing the classified nature of the Clinton emails in order to protect state interests and those of Clinton." The FBI agent specifically uses the term quid pro quo. This is no small thing.
I understand
senior
that.
executives
I understand
accused
that.
of trying to
I understand that, which is why I
agent.
came out here and said there's no quid pro quo. Absolutely not.
Happened. Both the FBI and State Department emphasized to reporters today the email's classification was never changed, and the FBI never got additional slots for its agents overseas. But legal experts say even the discussion of a backroom deal potentially violates federal law. Megyn.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joining us now, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Well, this stinks to high heaven, and we don't have to look far to figure out whether at least the person on the receiving end of the proposed deal thought it was a quid pro quo, because it's in the FBI agent's notes.
Right. So an FBI agent who was in charge of handling documents that had been accumulated in the Clinton investigation was approached by Patrick Kennedy. Mrs. Clinton is not the Secretary of State at this point. Patrick Kennedy's working for Secretary Kerry, and he makes the offer that Catherine Herridge just described for us. Can you change the marking on this document? Now,
he was working for us.
Correct.
When he's doing that. He doesn't answer to Hillary Clinton anymore.
Correct.
He's supposed to be looking out for us.
Markings on documents are changed all the time. They're changed so that people at a lower level of security clearance can read documents that they otherwise wouldn't be able to read because they need to see what's in there. But they are never, ever, ever lawfully changed after they've been subpoenaed and when they've been accumulated as evidence in a criminal investigation. And it was under that circumstance that Patrick Kennedy asked this FBI agent, whose name we haven't been given, but who obviously reported it to his bosses, to make those changes, which of course he refused to make.
And let's say Patrick Kennedy, who is, again, he is neck deep in Benghazi. I mean, the blame was there was plenty to go around when it came to how that hit was handled, the absence of security, despite the begging of Ambassador Chris Stevens and others. But Patrick Kennedy was right in the mix of it and was not blameless. So he pops up again. And it'd be one thing if he saw a document, Judge, that he said, this is legitimately problematic and we shouldn't be producing this, and so it needs to go into a basement and never to be seen again. But if that were true, he wouldn't have to be offering the FBI all these carrots to get them to agree to his little proposal.
The offering of the carrot, as you put it, even though it was not accepted by the FBI, is an attempt to commit bribery. The FBI didn't see it that way. They didn't charge him with anything, either because they felt they couldn't prove the case, or maybe the FBI was in the tank for Mrs. Clinton and all of her people from day one of these investigations.
That's not easy to believe.
It's very, very difficult to believe. I agree with you. But the evidence is there in the FBI document, which came out over the weekend. He offered me something of value, not to me personally, but to the FBI, if we would alter evidence. So that's an effort to bribe, to deface evidence, to obstruct justice. Was anybody charged with any of those crimes? No.
And the advantage to him in having the FBI classify this document from what it was to something else was that it would get buried, that the FBI wouldn't have to have it, it wouldn't have to get produced publicly, no one would ever have to see it.
Correct. And his former boss and still dear friend, Secretary Clinton, could not be blamed for exposing a national security secret, which of course she's done hundreds of times.
Judge, good to see you.
Likewise.
So the Clinton campaign is also dealing with new fallout from leaked emails, including one that shows their immediate, unvarnished reaction to a national tragedy. It came immediately after the December 2015 San Bernardino terrorist attack, when two Muslim extremists opened fire on a holiday party, killing 22 people and injuring many more. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is live in Washington tonight with more. Ed?
Good evening, Megan. Julian Assange says the Ecuador government cut off his internet access, but WikiLeaks at this hour is now back up and running and just dumped out about another 3,000 emails. One that is pretty fascinating, you mentioned, from last December after the San Bernardino massacre, leaving 14 people dead. John Podesta, the campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton, sent an email suggesting it might be better for the campaign in terms of its narrative if a non-Muslim had led the terror attack. After Clinton aide noted that MSNBC host Christopher Hayes had tweeted the name of the suspect and that it was Saeed Farouk. Damn, wrote campaign staffer Karen Finney, who is now the spokeswoman for VP nominee Tim Kaine. Podesta responded, quote, better if a guy named Saeed Farouk was reporting that a guy named Christopher Hayes was the shooter. Meanwhile, in the battle against ISIS, Clinton herself sent Podesta a shocking email taking aim at two U.S. allies. Clinton writing to Podesta in 2014, the government in the United States needed to, quote, bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region. Yet when it comes to Qatar, the WikiLeaks document dumps also show 2 years earlier, Bill Clinton had no trouble accepting big money from that same country for the Clinton Foundation. Emails showing that officials from Qatar, quote, would like to see WJC, using his initials, of course, for just 5 minutes in New York City to present $1 million check that Qatar promised for the former president's birthday in 2011. When questions were later raised about the $1 million and whether it was appropriate, top campaign aides emailed each other, said no big deal, take the money. Megan?
Ed, thank you. Joining us now, Matt Bennett, a former deputy assistant to President Bill Clinton, and Pete Hoekstra, Trump campaign national security advisor and a former congressman. Great to see you both. So let me start with you on this, Congressman. The notion that this was problematic in the Clinton camp, that this man who committed this horrendous act of terror was Muslim, and it would have been far preferable if the man had been white, says what about Team Clinton in your view?
Well, it says a couple of things. Number one, it's always about the spin. In San Bernardino, they had to control the spin because the Clinton narrative was always, we don't have to worry about the threat from radical Islam. They did the same thing in Benghazi when they said the attack was a result of a demonstration when it was really because there was an attack. They also said it was America's fault because there was a video. In reality, it happened because they hated us. So it's always about getting the spin right time after time and time. It is political corruption because everything is about getting to the vote and winning the vote and never solving the problem.
Matt, what is wrong with that? Because you can see a lot of people not understanding why it was so problematic in their view that the killer happened to be a radical Islamist, killer.
Well, first, Megan, let's just remember where this comes from. These were stolen documents, just like in Watergate, where someone broke into the DNC and stole documents. Here, the Russian government stole documents from John Podesta, his personal property.
You're right.
And dumped them out onto the internet with no context whatsoever. So what we're seeing is this one exchange between two Clinton staffers without any context. We don't know if they talked in the hall 2 minutes before this. We don't know anything about the context of this. So for Peter to say that this is clearly political spin is ridiculous. We don't have any idea why John and Karen were having this exchange. They may have been worrying about something else.
But you have to see this as problematic. I mean, it plays right into the narrative that many people already believe about the Clintons and the Obama team, for that matter, which is there's just a complete unwillingness to accept reality, which is that there are radical Muslims, not mainstream Muslims, but there is a faction of Islam that has corrupted the most extreme words that are written in the Quran and elsewhere into a mandate to kill. Why is it so hard to? That's not condemning all of Islam. It's just understanding that sometimes when domestic terror acts are committed, they're committed by radical Islamists.
There's no question that's right, and there's also no question that Secretary Clinton understands that to her bones. I mean, she was involved in every major decision.
Why is her team
early
so
in the Obama
upset that it's a Muslim committing a terror act as opposed to a white man?
Well, look, I don't know because I don't know the context, but let's just take it. Peter speculated. I'll speculate too. If a white man commits this, unfortunately in this country, there's 33 murders every single day. This would be par for the course. But if this is Muslim terrorism, then there is all kinds of other implications. There could be follow-up violence. It's enormously dangerous to other people as opposed to being would likely be an isolated incident. So there's a lot of reasons that they could have been reacting the way that they did.
That, Congressman Hoekstra, you tell me, that sounds like a very charitable read of what we saw in that Karen Finney email.
It is a very charitable read. And Matt is absolutely right. Hillary Clinton was involved in every major foreign policy and domestic security decision for about 4 years. And she always sided with the radical jihadists. In Egypt, she decided to engage with the Muslim Brotherhood. In Libya, she sided with the radical jihadists to overthrow Gaddafi. In Syria, again, we allied ourselves with the radical jihadists. Today, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, they are all failed states. They are all sending massive flows of refugees into Europe. She has consistently been wrong on her strategies to confront, contain, and ultimately defeat radical jihadists. We've gone from 3,000 people killed per year to over 30,000.
We got to leave it at that. Great to see you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Well, there was a landslide of new polls today on both the national race and the swing states, and Chris Stirewalt is just ahead with some interesting findings buried in the numbers. Is that a new headshot? Look how sweet he looks. He just looks like, hi, Stirewalt. Plus, Donald Trump is taking heat from all sides as he ramps up warnings about what he's calling a rigged election. Dr. Ben Carson is just ahead to weigh in on that. And then with 9 women now accusing Donald Trump of crossing a serious line involving sexual assault, his wife has come forward to talk about the accusers, her husband, and how she reacted when she saw tape of her husband talking about grabbing women. That's next.
From a woman's perspective, what were your thoughts when you heard those tapes?
Breaking tonight, we have brand new reaction from Melania Trump, who is speaking publicly about the series of women who have come forward now accusing her husband of sexual misconduct. Mrs. Trump's decision to address the issue comes as a 9th accuser, a woman by the name of Kathy Heller, talks about an incident 20 years ago when Donald Trump, she says, attempted to forcibly kiss her. Trace Gallagher is in our West Coast newsroom with the very latest. Trace?
Megan, 63-year-old Kathy Heller claims that on Mother's Day in 1997, she and her family were having brunch at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach when Trump came to introduce himself. But instead of shaking her hand, Heller says he grabbed her arm and went for the lips, kissing her on the side of the mouth. A relative who was there has backed up Kathy Heller's account, but the Trump campaign says, quote, there is no way something like this would have happened in a public place on Mother's Day at Mr. Trump's resort. It would have been the talk of Palm Beach for the past 2 decades. For the record, Kathy Heller is a Hillary Clinton supporter and donor and claims that she's owed money by the Mar-a-Lago resort. In an interview for tomorrow's Fox and Friends, Melania Trump talks about the growing list of accusers. Watch.
Why now? Why 3 weeks before the election? What they're accusing my husband, that is not the person that I know.
Why do you think they would make this up then?
Because they want to damage the presidency of my husband. And it was all planned, was all organized from the opposition.
Melania Trump also addressed the Access Hollywood tape that prompted these allegations, acknowledging it was painful. Watch.
Those words, they were offensive to me, and they were inappropriate. And he apologized to me, and I accept his apology. And we are moving on.
Moving on, but also looking back, realizing that when Donald Trump decided to run, those negative stories would come out. Here she is again.
We talked about it. And of course we knew, because his life, what he achieved in life, where he was, his life was open book. A lot of people know about it. My husband, he's raw and he's real. And he tells it as it is. He doesn't want to brush it off under the rug.
And we should note Donald Trump calls his accusers horrible, horrible liars. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Well, Melania Trump isn't the only one taking on these allegations today. Earlier tonight, the issue came up during Carl Cameron's campaign trail interview with Donald Trump. Here's his response.
Look, first of all, they were all lies. They were made up stories. They were fabricated, whether they like Hillary or whether they just want to become a little bit famous or something. Every one of those charges were false, and they were lies. The woman on the airplane 35 years ago or 30 years ago, I mean, you don't even believe that one, okay? But I don't know, maybe you're very gullible, but you don't believe that one.
Joining me now, Crystal Ball, a senior fellow with the New Leaders Council. Carl Higbee, former Navy SEAL and spokesman for Great America Political Action Committee, and Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster and Washington Examiner columnist. Good to see you. So, Crystal, let me start with you on this. Now, there's 9 accusers, but just to be fair to Mr. Trump, the accusations range from, you know, he explicitly grabbed a woman's genitals to he went and gave me a kiss on the side of my mouth upon greeting me. Now, I don't know whether all of these are going to amount legally to sexual assault, but You heard Trump's dismissal. Your thoughts on Melania's statement tonight and Trump's?
Well, look, I mean, I think for Donald Trump, he continues to assert this as some sort of vast conspiracy and that all of them are lying. And one of the things that really bothers me, Megan, is this idea that the women are out seeking fame. No one is having fun right now. This is not a good time to go out and accuse a powerful man of sexual assault. They're being scrutinized for their looks, for their stories. They're being called liars. And Lord knows what kind of ugly threats and messages they're receiving. So this is not a fun thing for anyone to do. In terms of Melania, she doesn't need our sympathy. She's a grown woman, but I do feel for her. I mean, she's fighting for her husband. She of course believes her husband is going to defend him. One thing I would say, though, is that I hope that people would show Hillary Clinton, when she was in a similar situation trying to defend her husband, the same sympathy that Melania Trump also deserves and receives here.
Don't hold your breath on that one. I mean, you know, in her defense, I don't know that Hillary was as sympathetic when she was out there saying, this is a vast right-wing conspiracy as Melania is.
Well, but what you hear from Melania is also, it actually reminded me of the vast right-wing conspiracy comment, because she's also asserting that this is essentially a conspiracy, right? So
she was close.
I'm
only saying the tone and the delivery was different.
The tone is definitely different. But when you're the wife of course you're going to defend your husband. Of course you're going to go to bat for him. And so I think that's what you see here. And she does it very well.
Kristen, let me ask you that before we get to Carl. How dug in are people on this issue of the tape? Because the latest poll that came out showed they do think it's a legitimate issue. I mean, that virtually everybody has seen that tape in the entire country. And here are the numbers. 55% believe that it is a legitimate issue in the election, or Trump's treatment of women is, and that only 42% believe that it's not legitimate, which just about mirrors Trump's support, almost exactly the 42%. So how dug in are the voters?
Voters are pretty dug in, and Donald Trump has to be pretty glad to have a character witness like Melania Trump coming out, giving support to him, because the slew of polls that have come out in the last day or two have not been great news for him. But right now you have about 85% of Republican voters who say they're voting for Trump. About the same number of Democratic voters say they're voting for Hillary Clinton. 9 out of 10 of those folks say they're not going to change their minds. And even though a majority say that this issue is relevant, most people also said in that same poll that this isn't going to change their mind. So while Trump's probably glad to have Melania out there, hopefully putting this issue to bed, hopefully getting this out of the headlines so he can get back to the issues, his big challenge is not necessarily just sort of batting this down, because a lot of voters do think that his character is something that we should be discussing.
Carl, one of the things that Melania said tonight was, she said, first of all, she believes that Billy Bush, that she told CNN, she believes Billy Bush egged on Donald Trump in that tape, and that, she's sort of saying sometimes she feels like, she said it was boys talk, even though he was 59 years old when he engaged in it. I mean, how does that grab you?
Well, the thing is that he's still engaged in it, but, to the defense of Donald Trump, these women are getting debunked just as fast as they're coming out. You have Natasha, she was debunked by the butler. You have this Jessica Leeds, she was debunked by another passenger on the plane. You have Mindy McGillen that was debunked by the event that she said had happened. That didn't even happen.
Challenged is probably a more fair characterization. Debunked suggests that they've been proven wrong. There have been some challenges raised by others, but that doesn't
One woman said it
resolve
happened at an event that didn't even occur. So, yeah, I would say that's debunked.
Well, there's a headline saying the woman on the airplane has been refuted, Jessica Leeds. And when somebody comes forward and says, that's not how I saw it, and that person is a seriously flawed character witness, that doesn't refute anything. That just is another person saying, I have an issue with what she said. But, Crystal, the problem for Donald Trump is he doesn't have enough time between now and November 8th to try to disprove these women. And even if he did, the opinions on Trump among women and independents were firming up and not in his favor long before that Access Hollywood tape broke.
That's exactly right. Nate Silver actually, or at 538, has a column saying essentially men are voting in this election, or indicating that they're going to vote in this election like it's a normal year, and women are not. Women are disproportionately and in historic numbers right now going for Hillary Clinton. And the big problem for Donald Trump here is that a majority of voters think that he did the things that are being alleged, because it's consistent with his own words and with the way that, frankly, he's treated women over the course of his life and over the course even of this campaign. So it's too late for him to turn around that perception.
Carl, I got to go, but I want to ask you, what do you want to see? Which version of Trump do you want to see in this debate on Wednesday night? I mean, you want to see fighter Trump, presidential Trump? What do you want to see?
I want to see 25% of what we saw in the second debate and the other 75% pure policy, and I think he can do it.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, I got to go, but I got to ask Kristen quickly. Kristen, the poll's not in his favor. Does he have any chance? I mean, really, do you believe he has any chance still of winning?
He's got to pull off an almost perfect run in Florida, Ohio, Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire, and I think that congressional district in Maine. He's got to have everything go right. The odds are very long, but everybody's been wrong writing Donald Trump off till this point, so you can't completely count him out.
Great to see you all.
Thank you, Megan.
Great to see you. And in just 2 days, for the first time ever, a Fox News anchor will be moderating a general election presidential debate. Award-winning journalist Chris Wallace, widely regarded as one of the best questioners in the business. I'm convinced he wrote this. I know it. I know it. They just slipped the copy in. He is very good. Will moderate the all-important final debate between Trump and Clinton. It's a make-or-break event. It's less than 3 weeks before the historic election, and it'll be held within 48 hours. October 19th in Vegas. The best place to watch it is right here on the Fox News channel, because Brett and I will be on all night, and we will be giving you all of Chris Wallace's questions. I mean, secrets. We know how he prepares, and we will take you inside the process and try to walk you through what to expect. We hope you join us. Well, we also have breaking news tonight on more than half a dozen new polls just out and the shape of this race heading into Wednesday night's big showdown. Plus, we'll show you how Amy Schumer, the comedian, angered her fans and touched off a national backlash with what she did to a Trump supporter in the middle of what was supposed to be a comedy show. And then Mr. Trump tonight added to the controversy over what he calls a rigged election. Dr. Ben Carson is next on that. Breaking tonight, despite a growing backlash, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump is continuing to charge that we are looking at a rigged election, and he's putting the blame squarely on the media.
You see what's happening? The process is rigged. This whole election is being rigged. These lies spread by the media. We're going to make history together. Remember, it's a rigged system. It's a rigged election. It's a rigged system. And they take these lies and they put them on front pages.
In moments, we'll be joined by Trump campaign advisor Dr. Ben Carson, but now a Trump campaign advisor. Doc, good to see you tonight. So let's say the system is rigged. Let's just say it is. Why is he going after the Republican leadership for rigging it? Is the Republican leadership rigging the ballot boxes and gearing up the media to be in the tank for Hillary?
No, of course not. I think he's a little bit miffed in terms of why they aren't investigating some of the allegations that have been made in places like Philadelphia, where there are huge numbers that voted for Obama and like zero for Romney.
But that's just that's just in a few counties. There are all these precincts, I should say, and in some precincts, Romney and McCain got 0 votes, and in other precincts, they got many votes. And in some of these little precincts, it's only like 100 people voting. So it's not that suspicious that the Republican got no votes.
I think the point is that, we obviously, it's too late to do anything for this election, but we should be looking at the integrity of our voting system. I was talking to someone last week who said they went to vote in the last election and they weren't asked for an identification of any type. Those are things that really could easily be rectified. But I think what's really being talked about here is the media and the excessive amount of attention that they've paid to, the allegations against Trump, and almost nothing with these massive things that are going on with the emails and with the leaks with Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. What that is doing is it is saying that level of corruption, let's just put our heads in the sand. And what is that saying to our children? If we continue to accept corruption, everybody's going to be corrupt.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. As somebody who was up against Donald Trump in the Republican primary season, do you see a difference in the way the mainstream media is covering him now versus the way they covered him back then?
Oh, it's a massive difference. Yes.
What is it?
During the primaries, they were all too eager to hear everything he had to say and, to put it, in a much better light than they are now. Now they've kind of turned against them and become instruments of the political class. Now, and remember, this election is not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about the political class versus the people. That's where the real difference is, and that's the reason that I actually think that Trump is going to win, because I think the American people are actually wise enough to see what's going on. They recognize that the media is very biased.
Having benefited from some inherent bias of the media to promote the ratings machine, as he calls himself, in the primary season, is he really in a position now to complain when they cover him just as much now, but the coverage tone has shifted markedly, and I might add, predictably?
Certainly, it would be wise at this stage, at this late stage, to really concentrate on the issues, because the differences between Trump and Clinton on some of the major issues that affect our society are gigantic, and yet people aren't getting a chance to hear about that, and they need to hear about it so they can make an intelligent decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been interesting. It has been pretty marked. The difference between the primary coverage, as you of all people know, versus the general election coverage. But that was never going to be a mystery. That did not come as a shock.
It also shows you how much power they have. It shows you how much power the media has.
They do.
And I continue to plead, particularly with young journalists, to bring some integrity back. It would help us as a nation tremendously.
Great to see you, Dr. Carson.
You too, Megan.
Well, less than 48 hours to what could be the most important debate of the year. Or it could be completely, no, actually it can't. This is going to be a big one. And we just got a landslide of new polls. Chris Stirewalt and Tom Bevan are here on what the numbers mean for Clinton versus Trump. You heard Kristen Saltese Anderson saying, don't count Trump out. People have done that time and time again, only to find themselves embarrassed. These guys are here on round 3. "22 days to the election." Think of that. 3 weeks and 1 day away. Just 48 hours from the third and final presidential debate. And today we saw a half dozen major polling firms release new results. And to see how much a debate can help move the numbers, look at where we were right before the last debate and where we are tonight. She was up 3.2. Tonight she's up 7.1 percentage points over Trump. Joining me now, Chris Stirewalt, host of I'll Tell You What, right here on Fox with Dana Perino, and Tom Bevan, co-founder and publisher of RealClearPolitics.com. Good to see you both. So, I mean, 7.2 percentage points is huge. That's huge, right, Chris? I mean, You tell me that's huge, and tell me whether there's any historical precedence for a candidate overcoming that kind of gap with this much time left.
No, but then again, there's no historical precedent for the reality television show host becoming a major party nominee. So we can't pretend like this is a normal year, right? There's no precedent for a former president's wife being a major party nominee. So to a certain degree, we have to allow that things that we haven't seen before could happen this time. And that's why this is the most fascinating election that I've ever covered. That having been said, Donald Trump was almost tied going into the first debate. If you'd have shown the first debate, so he was almost tied going into the first debate. Then he started to lose ground, and then he lost more ground. And it wasn't just what happened in the debates. It was how he conducted himself in the weeks after those debates that set him back, and that's why he's down so much going into this one.
He not only did he go after this beauty queen, but he insulted women and he insulted fat Americans, which is not smart at all. And, you know, right, Chris?
I'm here. I'm sitting right here.
I can hear you.
Exactly.
To be honest, I mean, it wasn't just Donald Trump's debate performances. It was the release of this tape. Right? It was the accusations. I mean, that's what's happened between the second debate and now, which is really driven. I mean, you look at all the data. I mean, women have fled him. He's lost his lead with independents. I mean, this last 10 days has been catastrophic for him, not because necessarily he had a bad debate performance, but because of all the other stuff that has gone on surrounding his campaign.
What do you make tonight, Chris, of the polls that came out showing it was a 4-point race, according to this Washington Post poll? But they're also saying that he's stuck and he's hit his ceiling. But still, I mean, 4 points, according to the Washington Post ABC News survey.
I like chicken. I like ribs. I like steak. But I like Slim Jim better than all of them. And if Dana Perino were here right now, she would tell me to explain about the Slim Jim. We take all of the delicious meats, we combine them into one fantastic smoked sausage, and we get a polling average. And in the halftime report polling average, you know what we found out? It started tacking the wrong way for Trump, and it goes and it goes. So is it 4 points? Is it 12 points? How about the average of those two? And we find ourselves 7-8 points down.
And in the end, he brings it home, ladies and gentlemen, sort of.
Medium.
Tom, Ohio, CNN's latest poll showing Trump up 4. North Carolina, Trump down just 1. Nevada, Trump down just 2. Is the race closing in a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? We've got Clinton expanding her lead nationally up to 7 points, but we've got Trump holding strong in some of these battleground states, Ohio being one, Iowa's another one. North Carolina still remains relatively close. But again, he's now behind in most all of those states, except for the two that I mentioned. And while his base is sticking with him, as I mentioned before, these other groups are leaving him. And if he doesn't turn something around in the next 3 weeks and bring those groups back, he's going to end up with his base, and that's it, and he's going to lose.
Hence the, having Melania come out and try to speak to some of those women that he's lost. Great to see you both. Well, a GOP campaign office in North Carolina was firebombed and vandalized over the weekend. But in a rare feel-good story during what's been a brutal election year, some local Democrats pitched in on the effort to help repair the damage over at Republican headquarters. Brian Kilmeade is co-host of Fox & Friends and also the author of Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, which is now out in paperback. You can get it real cheap joins us now. Brian, good to see you.
Great to see you.
So this is a moment of unity in the end. It starts off ugly. It ends nicely.
Right, and Joe Trippi's part of it. Fox News' own. He comes to our Christmas parties. We hang out with him. He invites us to barbecues. I couldn't go. I'll have more on that later. But he is part of the Democratic cadre that said, let's get a U Fund page together, see if we can get $10,000. They got $13,000 almost right away. They gave it right to the Republicans and say, rebuild your office in a very Democratic district of Orange County, right near Chapel Hill. Associate professor says, you know what, Hillary Clinton should even give this money. After all, this flammable liquid, this firebombing of this building went in. Thank goodness nobody was hurt, but serious stuff. Nazi paraphernalia on the sidelines, Nazi graffiti. So nothing good about it. If it was on the other side, they'd be saying, see how poisonous Donald Trump is. Right now, they're saying Democrats picking on Republicans in a Democratic district.
Well, it's good to see them sort of stand together against something like this. Okay, Amy Schumer, comedian, actress, in a lot of trouble. When I hear this soundbite, I want to tell the audience, I can't understand it that well. This is what she's going to say. She's got a Trump supporter on stage. She's giving him a hard time about being a Trump supporter. Watch and listen.
Do you get worried he'll be impulsive and get us in a lot of trouble we can't get out of?
Well, I'm an internist, so I get really scared when I hear some of the stuff he says. But I'm not really voting for Trump. I'm voting against him.
Okay, you can go sit down. It's just cool to hear one guy who doesn't seem like a psychopath why he would want to vote for that orange sexual assaulting fake college starting.
So she's making the man defend his vote for Donald Trump, and the fans there were not happy, Brian.
Calls this guy Dave on stage, says, what is this with Trump supporters in my audience? It's Tampa. It's a very Republican area, and